Om Bharatatve Sadalino Ramakrishna Samagyana Yodharma Astaparaparo Virasham Tanamamyaham Kalindi Fulakamale Madhavena Kridarata Brahmananda Navastubhyam Sadguru Lokanayaka Yogananda Premananda Daschanye Vayecha Parshada Ramakrishna Gatta Prana Sarvandhan Pranamamyaham Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We salute the servants and the servants of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who have their life forces merged in him. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karva Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome. We are gathered here in this location of our SRV Big Island ashram. And very few of us have shown up today on this rainy, cloud-filled sky with thunder. Occasionally you might be able to hear it if you're live streaming, which we welcome you if you are. But we are here after a week break where we were on retreat, a retreat called the Precipitous Ascent into Higher Awareness. And we last weekend looked into that august subject with the 4 yogas, what Swami Vivekananda called the new religion of the age. The 4 yogas taken in hand and into mind and studied and contemplated and taken apart. Sort of like taking apart a clock and seeing how it works and putting all the parts back together. These 4 yogas are intrinsically one, but we look at them from the standpoints of our actions, our knowledge, our meditation, and our devotion. So we took a week off last week, as you know, if you were live streaming constantly on Sundays with us, to undergo that retreat. We all came off of it shining with Dharma wisdom to contemplate. And now we are here to give the 5th class on my Guru's teachings. A retreat we did in Seattle. That's the subtitle of it. The main title of it was Advaita Vedanta in a Jivan Mukta. A Jivan Mukta is a living liberated soul, and that condition that he or she lives in is called a Jivan Mukti. So we'll be looking at that right off the top this week. This is the final of 5 classes, as I said, on Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj's teachings. And we've been through 4 previous weeks of teachings where he read the Riot Act on the West, where he lived for over 40 years as a monk, coming out of India in the Ramakrishna order, and after also graduating from Christian college in India. So he was well positioned to assess the condition and problems of Western society, particularly as it pertained to gaining spirituality, this inner growth that we covet and take very seriously if we're dharmis, that is, if we like to follow the Dharma, which is a cut higher than morality and ethics. Morality and ethics is a good beginning, Therefore, Swami Vivekananda used to say, it's good to be born in a church, but don't die in a church. He thought we should go on to these higher teachings called the Dharma, Dharmic wisdom. And Sri Krishna in the Gita says so, that knowledge must also end in truth, because if knowledge just stays in its own territory then and stews there, then it can become dangerous, as we've often seen with some of the problems of our own Western science. It has advanced knowledge on the level of matter and physical nature, but if it doesn't go anywhere, don't use it to benefit people in a way that's in line with higher knowledge, not just pleasure or comforts, or particularly not war and domination over other cultures, then that knowledge can turn sour. And Krishna also mentions that in the Gita. What you want is sour first, but turns sweet later. So sour to us in Vedanta and in other walks of religion that consider austerities precious, say austerity, spiritual practice, instead of, say, maybe healing and pleasure seeking. That is more powerful on a level of transformation. So we want to take that to ourselves, and when we do so, then benefit ourselves immensely, and also benefit our atmosphere and the world in general. That was what Swami Aseshanandaji did when he was amongst us, speaking to some 20, 30 people a week from the pulpit on weekends, and then holding pujas and worships on holy days for many, many years in Portland, Oregon, where I was fortunate enough to be born, right near Portland, and therefore found him right away and was able to grow up with him when he was at a very mature stage in his 80s and 90s. So I got really the tail end of his life, but it was when his teachings had reached a certain maturity that was very wonderful to listen to and galvanizing and also transforming. That's that Dharma in action. It'll take you and transform your mind, lift it up out of mundane, conventional concerns and preoccupations, and posit it right in the heights of truth, higher wisdom, which we looked at Sunday before last. That is, in our last class we looked at the Paravidya division. Oh, there's that thunder if you can hear it. Reminds me of a song in India. Kali's wisdom thunder rumbles profoundly with a power that can level mountains. That was, of course, translated by our Lex Hixon, our founder of SRV Associations. And you are here with us then again in the SRV Associations, where Mother Kali holds the background of our consciousness, and where Sri Ram, Krishna, Holy Mother, and Swamiji come to the fore and teach us in such beautiful ways, and have been doing so as long as we could adhere to them and find them in this lifetime. We consider that lifetime where you find the Dharma probably one of the last that you will have to live. That is, you can come back again as a Jivan Mukta, living liberated soul, but we don't consider those beings really to be born or to die. Even though they may hold bodies, they only associate with those bodies and they don't identify with them, which is the case of so many other people we see around us, fully identified with body, senses, sense objects, all on the physical level, and not able to look into their subtle senses, like in dream, bring more consciousness into dream state, and beyond that into deep sleep, where that ego goes away, the same way it might in a good meditation. So that's why I've often called people who go into deep sleep very good meditators, but then they wake up without the semblance or trace of the state they were just in hours previously. So some awareness needs to be brought to all of that. In fact, one of the quotes on these charts we're about to look at is from Swami Aseshanandaji, and he says that waking, dreaming, and deep sleep have to be transcended in order to get nirvikalpa samadhi. So those words, Jivan Mukta, that is a living liberated soul, and nirvikalpa, the extinction of kalpas or time, space, and causality, really go together very well. And they've been accented in different periods of India's spiritual history, if the term can be allowed. And these eternal teachings have come forward at different times. And it's very good in this time with Swami Vivekananda bringing the Vedanta to the West that he's brought so many of them forward at once. He was very keen on us learning the Sanskrit and its implications, its meanings, and so that we could contemplate some of these great teachings, because just plainly said, these teachings aren't here in our Western upbringing, where Christianity and Catholicism, and even over hundreds of thousands of years, a couple thousand years in Europe, and have focused pretty much on dualism and sometimes dipped even down into narrow fundamentalism, and have also focused on devotional path of prayer, and have not been given much of the transcendental path of meditation, which you'll have to learn from an Eastern master if you learn it at all in this lifetime, if you live in the West. You'll have learned it from a Tibetan or a Zen monk or a Vedantic Swami. And that's a great boon that you should prize in your lifetime and practice. So we'll also have some teachings on that from one of Swami Aseshanandaji's quotes about looking to the background in meditation beyond time and space. A lot of this is coming up in the next 3 hours, so hang on to your chairs or onto your asanas, whatever you're sitting in. We kind of prefer this nice tripod position here, just like the camera, which is focusing on me right now, sitting on a tripod. So this is a good way of opening up the energy at the base of the spine by having your legs in this position and your spine straight and your breathing regulated and your mind focused, your prana rising, and hopefully with it some Shakti. I wanted to make a bumper sticker for the back of my car, powered by Shakti, instead of by gasoline. The whole thing is powered by Shakti. Everything, this dynamic power that is innately spiritual in nature, and which transcends but infills nature in all of its movements. In fact, one of the quotes about to come is that Advaita Vedanta doesn't take kindly to the idea that Brahman moves. It's immovable. And so if it's immovable, then it would also be penetrating everything, or what we call all-pervasive. And so there's also a chart we'll look at about some inscrutable epithets of Brahman. So that's a kind of an introduction to things that you will see. So we're starting with this one of 10 Jivan Mukta charts that I created for the retreat in Seattle some months ago. This one is number 8. You won't see it on your screen because some of these we don't have available, all of them, but you will see the charts that they will go to. And I think with that as an introduction and a preamble, we should look at some of these quotes. Now, it's wonderful to just get to warm up to the subjects that Swami Aseshananda brings to us. And in this particular chart, you see Holy Mother superimposed against one of this background sunset and ocean. This is what's lately been referred to as wallpaper. Some of these images they're putting out are very beautiful, much more beautiful than wallpaper. In fact, it'd be nice to see them put into actual wallpaper so we could put them up in our houses, the inside of the walls. I like to have Dharma on the walls, you see. So these charts are going to be made available to people so they can actually secure them and put them on their walls and teach their children and their guests and enliven dinner parties and all sorts of things. We want to bring these teachings into every mind here in the West so that this knowledge that we're being given will have some place to go, will have some place to develop to, and will send our mind into an exalted state. Will transport our mind, as Lex Hickson used to say, our founder. So let's start out with a quote about her that's very pregnant from Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj. It'll warm us up. He says here, "Death is bound to come to every person, but one can become deathless by repeating the mantra, which awakens spiritual consciousness and leads one to the ultimate goal. That is how I contacted Holy Mother after she passed from the body. She is a deathless being." So Swami Aseshanandaji had the great boon of seeing Holy Mother while she was in the body, getting the mantra from her, straight from her, and bowing before her and touching her feet. It was Holy Mother's, we call her Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna's divine consort, and the mother of the Ramakrishna order, which is some 5 or 6 million strong now, I think, in the world, and hardly ever heard of. We're very behind the scenes, this Vedanta, underground river we call it. But this is a pregnant statement because he saw her in the body, and then he said, now with the mantra she gave me, I contacted her after she passed from the body. So it showed that he was in having darshan with her inside his whole life. His students, those of us who went to meet with him, knew this to be the case, because on the outside he could scold you and he could be very stern, and he was doing it for your own highest good, of course, making you lose your Western ways or your complacent ways, indeterminate ways. And he would then, when you got alone with him, he would smile, and it wouldn't be his smile you're seeing. It would be Holy Mother's own smile, as if she had gotten into him very deeply. So this is the result of him meditating on her all the time and then contacting her inwardly. So it's at once a statement of finding holy company outwardly, but also a statement of how these inner avenues open up, and spiritual life is real and spiritual life is true for the one who develops these inner channels. It's just, you might as well say God doesn't exist for those who don't develop the ability to go within. You see people all the time nowadays looking up in the sky and praying up in the sky, and as if science and so forth, or even heaven is up there, but we know what they mean if they have the best intentions, but the real purpose is to go within and look within. So that's why in meditation you see beings like Swami Aseshanandaji and Swami Vivekananda, whose pictures we have, looking down the bridge of the nose into the heart, as the Gita says. And so you're really going inward to these dimensions that don't take up height and breadth and width and length and so forth. Are inner regions where consciousness presides and where consciousness reigns. And so awakening your own consciousness would be very important like that. Otherwise, there's this, he says, without attaining Atmagyan, that's wisdom of this inner self, your true nature, ultimate knowledge, fear will never disappear from your heart. You will be a prisoner of time, always thinking in terms of the future, of a post-mortem emancipation only, of going to heaven through the grace of God. Then you will begin to think, I will go to live there forever. And you will never wake up and begin to think, if there is the act of going, then there must also be an act of coming back. So this is where he clarifies the Vedantic view, is that reincarnation is not the ultimate goal, even if you were to believe in it. For those who don't believe in reincarnation, or that you've lived many lifetimes, it's rather a moot point. If you want to just be born and die again without knowing, that's up to you. But for those who are thinking that of going to heaven, then you see it's kind of a medium point. That is, I will go and I'll live there forever, but you don't know that going is also attended by coming back. So, and that heaven is not a very deep level of your consciousness. There's actually heaven right here on earth for some people. That you can be in a kind of heavenly zone. So any place where there's name, form, time, space, and causation, that's the definition Swami Vivekananda gave to that term Maya. Maya is that flummoxing, inscrutable presence of name and form and time and space and cause and effect that puts us off of our true nature, makes us go to sleep. And so anytime there is coming and going, there is that duality. You're coming through space, you're going to space. It takes time to do that. You've given it a name, heaven, earth, and hell. There's a cause and an effect of thinking that way. So the great thinkers like this think higher than they think outside the box, outside the Tripurti even, and into a transcendent position. So these are very powerful statements that Swami Aseshananda made while I was listening to him, and we gathered them here and put them into the series of 10 charts as a memory to him, because a deep memory, smriti hetu kind of memory, a causal memory, because he has come out of this deep space and taken a body, given us these teachings, and gone back in to his true nature, all at the behest of Shakti. And this Holy Mother was, of course, he was powered by Shakti. This was his ideal, Sri Sharda Devi. So here, on the upper right hand, he says, Christ's message was not one of salvation. It was one of enlightenment. Salvation conveys a post-mortem emancipation idea, but freedom is Jivan Mukti, here and now. So that's why I wanted to put up this Jivan Mukti chart, and I wanted to put it side by side with this Christ as the renunciate chart, because this one, actually two-sentence statement calls into mind both of these. So let's take a look at these before we look further into Swami Aseshanandaji's sayings. Now, we have taken this up before in classes. It has gotten a facelift with a beautiful image of Shankara and his Shiva and Shankara and his devotees behind, and the Himalayas in the background. We call this chart the state and characteristics of a Jivan Mukta. Now remember, Jivan Mukti is the state of enlightenment. Jivan Mukta is the one who is in that state. So we would call Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj a Jivan Mukta, and Swami Vivekananda, of course, he was also a Nityasiddha, an internally perfect soul. So there are stations of consciousness that, even at a very transcendent and high level, are gradated. The Upanishads provide for them, so we have to realize that everything here is gradated, even the soil is gradated. Deeper soil, stone cliffs have deeper striation to them and surface. So this is the same with spiritual atmospheres, these kingdoms of heaven within, is they're gradated by level, and consciousness has to be awakened to that level in order to see it. So if you're totally turned off to anything inward, then you're restricted just to this one outer layer. There's a song in India that says, "Oh small self, you're just a sparkling fish. You only frequent the surface of the lake where death is granted its fishing grounds." So again, very powerful statement that leads us to understand that we need to dive deep, not just stay at the surface all the time where death is granted its fishing ground. That's where Maya, time, space, causality, and everything goes on in cycles, in these surface cycles. Gunic cycles, or gunic patterns are called in Vedanta. So if we can find that we can break the surface and dive deep, then we come up with this gem of love that's down. Like Swami Vivekananda, when the ocean swells, then you can't see the bottom, but when it dips into a trough like that, then all of a sudden you can see coral and gems and shining things. It's a very beautiful statement, because usually that trough it goes into is the mind's depressed. Then when it swells, it's happy with pleasure, you see. So when you're in pleasure and surface bliss and so forth, you cannot really see yourself. You're just seeing the ego happy, the Lego life. But when it dips and things are getting hard and you're having to be tested and you're challenging yourself and you're practicing austerity and so forth, that's where this mind goes into this deep trough and you can see all the gems and coral there in the depths. It's an analogy that Swami Vivekananda gave in his letters to people. And so then you might say, not frequenting the surface like that, but always learning to dive deep. I used to give the example of a child trying to learn to swim. So first he has to learn to float. He has to get rid of his fear of sinking. But if he just relaxes, he'll just float. So you teach him to lay on his back, and it's okay, relax, I'll hold you by the back, and so forth. But then when he gets happy with the water, you see, and he's like a little fish, then you show him how to dive. But very difficult to dive, because now he's gotten used to the body floating. So he used to think it would sink. Now he thinks it floats. So it's a conundrum, you see. So spiritually, you know what I'm saying. You fear first, and then you realize that you're soul is buoyant, it will float on the water of the world. And then you want it to go deep, deeper than the waters of the world. So you have to learn how to tuck and dive. You can't just try and, you've seen children try and dive, you see, their whole body flat, they try and go under, it won't work. So you teach them, no, you have to tuck your head near your chest and your knees, and you have to go straight down, you have to break the surface. See, there's a very good analogy, and Sri Krishna was always thinking of these kinds of analogies with what he saw in the world, in family life and country life, farm life, wherever he was. He would see things that would remind him of spiritual teachings. Well, this is one of the ones I think of, is that in order to learn how to break the surface, you have to tuck and dive. So you might say it's like taking your one deep breath, just like you have to do when you dive, and just exhaling and letting your mind go deep into meditation without any, it's rather against your nature because you've learned how to be buoyant. And surface spiritual people are like that, like New Age kinds of thinking, you see. But now you have to put weights on. You have to get below the surface, so you have to be able to dive deep, and you have to make yourself less buoyant, more weighty, deep, get into the profound things, because your mind wants to stay on the surface of spirituality, just like it wanted to stay on the surface of the world when you were young. So this is all spiritual transformation that's going on in you, again, if the term can be allowed. And so all of that is a precursor to this description of Jivan Mukta. And let's look at what a Jivan Mukta is like. We won't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I put side by side Lord Vashishta, who is one ancient bookend of India's spiritual history, and Shankara, who is more contemporary. 700 AD is fairly recent for India. And of course, Vashishta's time wasn't all that ancient. So these two bookends they were both Jivan Muktas, and they both had a lot to say about the Jivan Mukti state. So first, a description from Vashishta. He says, those rare beings who are firmly set on the path of Brahman, who are always engaged in certain knowledge that the universes in space and time, though emanating from the self, do not really exist and never did exist, they are the living liberated souls. So only the self exists, or only Brahman exists, and all these universes are just waves on the ocean of Brahman that are rising and falling. That's the idea. So it doesn't put you off or confuse you. Unreal really means changing in Vedanta, something that probably should have been explained to us decades ago after Swami Vivekananda was here. Unreal doesn't mean like illusory in a desert, like a mirage, you see. But it means like just all changing, so you cannot build your house on that shifting sand, as Jesus said. Now, Shankara's description of Jivan Mukta fills it out more. Jivan Mukti, that is. He says, internally, externally, in the sentient and the insentient, everywhere, knowing the self as the basis of all, who has given up names and forms and become one undivided self, one who lives in that state is surely a liberated one, a free soul. So it gives us a deeper look into that, and also brings up the idea of names and forms, how the Jivan Mukta would give that up, the idea of I'm a name, I have a name and I have a form. These are actually just overlays that the Jivan Mukta has taken on. We'll use them accordingly. Let's look at what a Jivan Mukta is according to Vashishta, who appears to think and act like everyone else, but whose mind is free from karmas and from longing, who protects all beings via Tattvagyan and Atmagyan. It's a nice saying of Vashishta. Tattvagyan means teaches you the wisdom principles that are outside and inside, so that you can involve as well as evolve. And Atmagyan means that one steady wisdom out of which involution and evolution are taking place. So he will teach you both of those. Is indifferent to joy and pain arising from action. So any kind of action, like Sri Ramakrishna walking, fell, broke his arm. See, so anyone, even an enlightened soul, will run afoul of the solid mass called the physical world once in a while. Death will come, as Holy Mother says here, as Swami Aseshanandaji said in our opening quote. So all of these things, she, the Jivan Mukta, remains indifferent to. is equanimous in all that is obtained or lost. These are teachings on different levels of life for us to take as spiritual, in their spiritual value. Forsakes attainments foreign to the path of wisdom. Oh, but that we could do that. Forsake every path except just what's good for us. See, and not walk down those paths that are even unbeknownst to us, unadvisable. Make ceaseless inquiries into the nature of reality. And this is key. It's called Atmavichara. Vashishta was telling the young teenage Ram, the avatar of the age, unbeknownst to everyone yet, that he must inquire of the wise. So first you have to find holy company, then you have to approach them, bow down to them, serve them, and then ask them questions. Today, a young man from Midwest wrote me asking deep questions about Buddhism and Vedanta, and I was very keen on answering them, and we've been going back and forth and looking forward to a relationship in how Vedanta and Buddhism are just really one and the same, and in so many ways. And Vivekananda didn't see any difference from them, and the Hindu people keep Buddha on their altar, but they're not calling themselves Buddhists. See, it's just one of their spiritual avatars. So this deep inquiry is very important then for spiritual path. You should be at it every day. I mean, if you're driving around, you're thinking mundane things all the time, then the mind will stay on that surface level, where death is granted its fishing grounds, and where suffering is also granted its place. But if you keep your mind in the Dharma all day, it's always in the background, and then pretty soon your habits change, and your mind isn't brooding anymore, and your mind's not depressed anymore, and you're not sorrowful, and you're indifferent to calamities that happen, and you can easily witness phenomena that's going on all the time that people are getting bent out of shape about. You just stay equanimous. That's the idea. Why not? Why not do that? Ever interrogates the wise for keys to liberation. So the nature of reality, that's one thing, you see. You can ask questions about the Dharma, but they want to know also what's beyond the Dharma. What is liberation? What is Jivan Mukta? What does it feel like? Who is a liberated soul? Both Arjuna and Uddhava asked Krishna that at different stages of their life, of his life. See, basically, how does he think? How does he sit? How does he come? How does he go? How does he eat? How does he sleep? How does he wake? Those questions are in the minds of souls who really want to know about the liberated state. Does not transgress the instructions of the acharyas. If you take a guru and you take a mantra, you should stick with it. And you should have checked before very deeply, like Vivekananda even checked Ramakrishna, if that teacher was worthy. Basically, if he could transmit you the teachings, the essence of the teachings, if he lived a pure and stainless life, if she knew the essence of the scriptures, I said that, if she also lived an unostentatious life, a simple kind of life, and also is a knower of Brahman. Those are the four qualifications of a teacher. If you found a teacher like that, took a mantra and dedicated yourself, then you should never look back or change in the middle of the stream. I know so many people, Westerners mainly, who deviate, who haven't stuck to their original intentions, and it's betrayal. It's a betrayal of the teacher, it's a betrayal of the teachings, it's a betrayal of the spiritual family, and it's also, worst of all, a betrayal of themselves. They can't stick to their original intentions. So this is a very important point. We must realize then, and this will help this point, that a Jivan Mukta is the Lord in an embodied state, engaged in actions. If we think that have some idea that the Lord comes into a body and just sits there and does nothing, there may be a few beings like that who are supremely disinterested and sit in a cave their whole life. It may be an example for transcendental consciousness. But quite often the Lord gets dynamic with Shakti and goes and tries to serve, tries to help people and so forth. So it's very important. Jivan Mukta is detached even without performing austerities. So usually, like my teacher, Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj used to say, if we all knew who we are, then we would not need to practice spiritual disciplines like meditation, puja, and so forth. If we knew we were the Atman. So some souls we see come into the world and they're not attached to ritual. Maybe they do it for the sake of others. They really don't even do any spiritual practice unless it's also to show others how to do it. So there are some souls like that. We have to polish our, we have to be that jewel polisher, you see, diamond cutter kind of idea. And so that you can recognize people where they are. And particularly that it pertains to high-souled people, high-minded people. Because then we can find them, we can keep their company. That will be good for us automatically. A Jivan Mukta also enjoys Jagrat and Sushupti, devoid of desire. Jagrat means waking state. Sushupti means dreaming. Of course, in Swapna, deep sleep, then, I'm sorry, I turned those around on you. Jagrat and Swapna are waking and dreaming. So, no desire in those. We'll just experience them as the witness. Not the dream, but the dreamer, as the songs in India say. But in Sushupti, that's the deep sleep state, and all of a sudden, of course, all desire is gone for all of us. And they're fully conscious in the deep sleep state. Most other beings aren't. So that's a sort of earmarking of the difference between a Jivan Mukta and ourselves. Associates with desire, but does not get defiled by it. Holy Mother used to tell us that when the devotees came to her and they came to know about Jivan Muktas and how pure they were. I said, well, what about us? We have so many desires still. We'll never be enlightened. We'll never be liberated. We'll never be free. We'll never be spiritually awake. She said, oh, don't worry, for you. You're the devotees of the Lord. The more desires come for you, the better. Let them come and go. So it's this idea about associating with desire but not being defiled by it, not being carried away with it. Knowing that it has a limiting side, if you will, or a certain heaviness with it, that it won't fulfill you in the end, that only God can fulfill you, your relationship with divine reality. And if that is initiated into your life, then you can go and have the simple desires of artha and kama, they're called. Just put dharma first, and then artha, wealth, and kama desire can go on without defiling you. It's a simple teaching. Of course, you have to be sincere about these things. Jivan Mukta is transcendent of conventional observances. Should be obvious. Also, is full of the certitude of his or her convictions. I used that phrase just a couple minutes ago. It's very important to follow through. Once you make up your mind, you stick to it. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you say, I'll be there, you should go there. Don't let rain or any other thing keep you away. If I had have let things keep me away from my teacher, then I would have not be sitting here sharing the Dharma with all of you for years at a time now. Because I've traveled 2,500 miles many times a year to get to him. So I took a lot of trouble to make sure I was in his presence. One time, I went up to him and I said, Sir, I see you're going to give a talk at a Christian church. They invited you to speak. Can I have the address to that? I'd like to come see you. I'd like to come see it today. So he said, he gave me the information. And then something happened and I didn't go. And so he scolded me the next time I saw him. He said, when you say you're going to do something, you should do it. Hold to it. So I think he used that as a way of battering down my ego and making me realize I must be true to my word fully. Sri Ramakrishna once, there's a story where he was invited to a gathering, and he said, I will go there, I will be there, don't worry. Without a doubt, I will be there. So then the gathering was canceled, and I think it could be he even heard about it, but he still said, since he said, I will be there, he walked miles to get to this place, stuck his head in the window and said, I have come, and then he walked back to the temple. So he was so attached to the truth like that, that he was impelled to follow through. So that's a good practice for all of us. The Jivanmukta lives in the bliss of Chidananda. Chidananda is the bliss of higher awareness. How else could you say it? Is also whose mind is in an indescribable state. So I won't try and describe it here. Who transcends the siddhas and lives in jnanam. The siddhas, siddha is an interesting word, siddhi. It can mean anything from marijuana to highest perfection. And in between, it could mean these beings who are siddhas who inhabit a realm very close to the earth realm. And they covet certain powers, siddhis. And so that keeps them from going very deep spiritually. They're sort of on the surface, like that little fish, of spiritual atmospheres. So this is what is being referred to here. It transcends the realm of the siddhas and goes to the deep jnana. Because the jnana yogis are much higher beings than the hatis, the ones who practice hatha yoga and covet longevity and healing and so those kinds of things. The jnanis are much, much deeper than that. So you should probably become close to a jnani and learn this dharma. Who retains sattvic desire in order to re-embody. So they do this on purpose. Other beings get drug from birth to death and death to birth. But if you're going to come back and you've decided that before you die, then you must have some sort of power, willpower for that. Willpower is all in your mind, and it's the mind that's doing the embodying, not God. So the mind says, I will come back, so I think I'll keep a little sattvic desire. We like to joke about that once in a while and say that Swami Vivekananda sometimes would leave the table because when he was invited to social gatherings here in the West in 1893, and when he was here, and so he would listen to people's silly talk, you see, around Western society in Chicago, New York, Boston, and so forth. And he wasn't into that. He didn't have anything to say on that level. So he would eat food graciously, then he would stand up and excuse himself. So he was the life of the party, so it didn't go over very well to the hosts when the great Swami stood up and left, because he wasn't able to engage in this mundane, surface, superficial conversation that goes on, these little zeros that come out of people's mouths. So they found out that he liked chocolate ice cream. So then they used that against him, you see. He says when he started to get up and excuse himself from the table, they'd say, Swami, there's chocolate ice cream, and he'd come right back and sit down. So they had him captured there, you see, around the table for a while, which is probably good for him and for them. So that's a subtle desire you can use on purpose. So you have to make a distinction between that, so you don't just criticize everything that goes on. Look for some fault in someone, or especially in an illumined soul who's far beyond those things, but who may use them to benefit you and also benefit them in helping you to get the Dharma and so forth. So also to come back in another life, I have to keep on some desire, because these spiritually minded souls, these Jivanmuktas, if they put their mind on God, they're gone and gone forever. That's a quote from Lord Buddha. I'm gone and gone forever. So if they put their mind on that ultimate reality, they will go to it, and nothing can stop them. It's like a bird flying higher and higher in the air. So if they, knowing that about themselves, you see, they will take on some subtle desire and keep it toward the end of their life, and that'll bring them back. Say the desire to teach might bring them back. Teach Dharma. Crosses samsara to get moksha, returns to help others. That's a nice one. These cycles of samsara, they see through them, they transcend them, and then they get freedom, and then they'll come back to help others. That's a perfect description for the Jivanmukti, for the Jivanmukta. That might be the main design of a Jivanmukta right there. Otherwise, you would be a Videha Mukta. You would never come back again into the body. There are great souls that have done that. Perhaps Jesus was one of them. Evidently, we haven't seen him for 2,000 years. Maybe he just gave his message and went and immersed in the Almighty Father, for all we know. Or maybe he came back a few times. More likely, he sent some emissaries back, like the Buddha fields. Lord Buddha sending back these emissaries, these bodhisattvas to help us. By the way, bodhisattva in Buddhism and Jivan Mukta, the Jivan Mukta in Vedanta are very, very closely aligned. I see almost no difference between them. They're free and then they come back to help. But you must get free first. You must assure yourself that you're free. And this will also be told to you by your teachers. In Buddhism, they actually make quite a big thing about that, the 10 pure lands, and which land you've attained. The other Buddhas will get behind and say, yes, you've arrived here. You're qualified to teach this much, you see. So it's a lot more directed in Buddhism. Purifies all desires and engages in life as mere sport. Well, who do you think of when you read that line? No other than Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa came back free of desires and then sported like no other soul we've seen sport in maybe in the history of our worlds. Destroys undue attraction to forms in the mind. Attains videha mukti at the end of life via samadhi. So there you have it. The videha mukta state means one and done. One lifetime, I've seen what's here. It doesn't interest me all that much. I'm leaving. Oh, wait a minute. Other people are caught in it. Maybe I should come back. So you've got this Jivan Mukta and Videha Mukta couple there, you see. A coupling. And so Jivan Mukta become a Videha Mukta and then come back. Who does that sound like? Describes very well our Swami Vivekananda, who Holy Mother said about him. He stays in meditation for 700 years at a time, untouched, unbothered, like a wooden statue, she said. So, but here we see him come back here in 1893 to the West, and come back to Earth to help us. He came back at the behest of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. That's why I started off the class today saying Paratattve Sadalino Ramakrishna Samagyana. He's the great Gyani that Sri Ramakrishna called, the equanimous one who called from those highest realms back to Earth to help us and inform us about some beautiful principle like Jivan Mukti. Uses jnana and pranic control to do away with pain. Like again, Swami Vivekananda and his diabetes. There was really no treatment for it back then. But he said, all I need is a good scripture, the Himalayas, and my seated position, and the fire of yoga, and I'm fine. So he obviously wasn't suffering pain. The yogi's mind can transcend pain. Always knows the unreal nature of the universe is the penultimate one. So knows that it's unreal again means ever-changing. You cannot build your house on it. We'll build no more houses there, Buddha said, not of wood, stone, flesh and bone, or wise conception. So I've given up all homes there. So the teachings of Christ and Buddha, 550 years apart from each other, sound very much the same. And finally, contemplates Atman while performing all actions. So keeps Brahman in the mix, as difficult as that is. Some people attempt it, probably prematurely, but these great souls can actually accomplish it and do it. Now let's look, as if that wasn't enough, I know, let's look at Shankara's own rendering of Jivan Mukti. Enjoys the burgeoning of endless merits. That's called Dharma Mega Samadhi, according to both the Buddhists and Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. Is always established in non-dual understanding. Is ever poised in the self, in Brahman. So Atman and Brahman, one and the same. It's just that Atman can go toward the sheaths if it wants. Brahman never will. See, so the two, sometimes people get confused. Oh, you have so many names for God. What about you're always using Brahman and you're using Atman? Well, Atman is that has the potential for embodiment. It means it will take on body, energy, mind, thought, and ego. Brahman will never do that. And so when Atman takes on these 5 sheaths, he has to do this only by association, not by identification, and then give them up. However, Jivan Muktas can identify. with those 5 sheaths and give them up. So they have some very special qualities that others don't possess. Is ever poised in the self and Brahman then. Now experiences freedom even in this world and body. That's pretty much another description of Jivan Mukti. Has mastered karma and desires. That's similar to what Vishishta said. Is peaceful and impervious to samsara. Also very much like what Vishishta said across the board. Retains no sense of I, me, and mine. Well, this is good to bring this in because this is new in these 2 lists. The sense of agency, the sense of ownership, also the sense of separation from God. These 3 things have pretty much been transcended by the Jivan Mukta. Sri Ramakrishna was a great example of that. He says, I gave up I, me, and mine, and now I say thou, thee, and thine. So it rhymes in English. I don't know in Bengali exactly if it rhymes. Is free of past, present, and future. Well, here we have a deeper teaching on time, the 3 phases of time. You see Shiva there in the background, sitting there with his forearms. He's the real master of 3 phases of time. That's why they name him Trikala Darshi. Darshi, seer, Trikala, the 3 phases of time, which means past, present, and future. So if you want to master those, then you have to use that word unreal. Time isn't really real. It comes from the mind. In fact, it disappears in the mind when I'm in deep sleep. It disappears at death. It disappears in deep meditation. And it will disappear for you in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So how real can it be, time? You don't need to ask if it's real. It's already been proven that it's not. It's a concept of the mind. It flows out of the mind. It flows back into the mind. And people base their past, present, and future lives on it, then that's rebirth. So you can give it up. You can see right through it. I, me, and mine, a good teaching. Is free of past, present, and future, who sees sameness everywhere and in everything. Samadarshitvam, one of Swami Vivekananda's favorite teachings, and that's what we'll look at here when we look at the lion of Vedanta. It's coming. Hang tight to your seats. Hang on every word, like I did with my teacher. Keep your breath going in slowly and eyes open, spine straight. Absorb the Dharma in huge amounts. One person who's watching, I'm pretty sure is watching today, asked me earlier in an email about that and said that, Babaji, you taught once that you want us to have the mind inundated with Dharma. Even if you can't take it all, just like a sponge that gets too wet, just soaked. Sri Ramakrishna also said that. Just dip the mind as if it were a towel into the Dharmic teachings until it just becomes soaked, completely malleable, and according to your will. Wring it out later of things that don't apply right away and keep the essence. So in order to do that, you're going to have to build some stamina. The first level of stamina is called staying awake. This is called spiritual awakening, by the way, everyone. So you're going to have to develop the ability to stay awake physically if you want to be awakened spiritually. Does it make sense? So keep those keys of breath, straight spine, posture, and inspiration on the wax. Keep them going. Who remains unchanged in pleasure and pain, across the board, just like Vishishta said again, whose heart is filled with the bliss of Brahman, also Vishishta mentioned, lives in the body, but only as its witness. That's a nice way of saying. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that Swami Vivekananda, who was then known as Naran or Narendra, was always going around with a faraway look in his eyes, like a mother bird hatching her eggs, was the saying. So that was Swami Vivekananda's condition even as a teenager, you see. So that being the case, then his mind was really not on the body. Quite often his clothes were in disarray and his hair was tousled, and he was just thinking of this divine reality, see, that gave him this bliss. And all these bullet points here were beginning to come out of him as he grew as a physical being in the physical body, as his body grew. Remains the same at all times, we said that. That's Samadarshitvam. That's Swami Vivekananda, is one of his favorites. In whom enjoyments enter like vast rivers. Isn't that much like across the board when Vasishtha said much the same thing, is that these desires don't defile that being. They come, but they don't defile him. So in that way, also, Vivekananda was in agreement with that. Desires may flow into them like vast rivers, but like an elephant getting in an ocean, nothing happens. Who has known the reality of Brahman. That's called Brahmavittama. Who sees indivisible oneness at all times. There's a challenge for you in this world of variation and separations and variegations and distinctions, to try and see that indivisible oneness at all times behind it all. Who is free from worldliness and its effects. Via revealed scriptures is free from the 5 sheaths. So we mentioned that. Jivanmukta can take on the 5 sheaths, even make it look like he is the 5 sheaths if he wants to, but there you see beyond that. Is free from caste, laws, blood ties, name and form. Ceases to follow the world, the body, and dogmas. That's important too. Conventional ways and means gives those up and goes for these more esoteric and spiritual pathways. Who sees Brahman in the sentient and the insentient. That was, of course, in Vasishtha's quote above. Or actually, no, that was in right there in the Vivekachudamani and Shankara's sayings. And who has made the intellect one with Brahman. Very important, because the intellect, usually under the control of the ego, wants to serve the ego only. And when you can convince that intellect to turn itself towards Brahman, then it becomes under the possession of Shakti. And all of these great wisdom will come out. We have to go back up here to this dharmic rain cloud of Dharma, you see, that we mentioned earlier. That's when all these great qualities come forth, when the intellect finally frees itself of the ego, turns inward, and sees Brahman and knows Brahman. It's a very beautiful teaching. Finally, who seeing reality has almost forgotten duality. Hard for them to even imagine that duality is real, even though other people may be thriving on it. Even spiritual beings might be thriving on it. Still, dualists. So let's cap this chart off. The one fixed in equanimity of mind frees oneself in this life from virtue and vice alike. Therefore, devote yourself to yoga. Work done to perfection is verily yoga. The wise, imbued with evenness of mind, renouncing the fruits of their actions, freed from fetters of births, verily go to the stainless state. That's Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So here we've had a beautiful rundown of what Swami Aseshanandaji was always going on and on about in his classes, this principle of Jivan Mukti. And it was certainly his higher ideal, as by his chants, by his quotes we see that. This combines then Lord Vasishtha, Lord Adi Shankaracharya, and Sri Krishna in one chart, and gives us a fuller idea of what this living liberated state is all about. Now we should try and return then to, if you'll remember this quote that we started off with about Christ's message was not one of salvation but one of enlightenment. Salvation conveys a post-mortem emancipation idea, but freedom is Jivan Mukti here and now. So we're looking at Jivan Mukti, we're also looking at post-mortem emancipation, and lo and behold, when we look at Jesus' teachings and some of the things he said to his apostles, we find out that Jesus fits the mold of a Jivan Mukta, not a savior. He would come off as a savior to some people. That was the people who were suffering and lowly and unhappy and sorrowful, didn't have the strength. But if you think about Jivan mukti, then that strength will come to you. You'll want to transcend. You'll want to become one with the Father. You'll want to become perfect as the Father is in heaven. And you will not be satisfied anymore with dualistic or fundamentalist leanings and teachings. Let's look at some examples of this in Christ's own words to his apostles. Matthew says this about it: "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it again." Doesn't it sound like a Jivan Mukta to you, one who has gone beyond all of these points, families and conventions, pleasures, various things? That's a direct statement that Matthew relates to us that Jesus said. So these are the key renunciation teachings of Jesus. A sannyasin, Jivan Mukta, is one who has taken the world and renounced it outright and could still live with it. That would be, again, a description of a Jivan Mukta. Still living in the world, as we saw by these points, is in the world but not of it, as they say nowadays in more contemporary terms. There can probably be no more stark statement about the dangers of family life in the world than that statement that Matthew related. And if you look at even in contemporary times, 2,000 years later, you'll find out that families, particularly in the West, the emotions around families, the money matters in families, the passions that arise in families, the sins and transgressions that are committed by families on other family members are rampant. And my students, even who are initiated into spiritual life, are saying how difficult their families are and how they have to get some distance from them. So I would take exception then, at least some exception to that current saying among the Christians, don't mess with family. I would mess with family a lot because family's a mess. And Jesus says so right there. So we're going to have to make sure that we're born of dharmic families first. If we are born into dharmic families, this doesn't apply. But most people don't have the wherewithal to consciously be reborn. Jivan Muktas do. And they'll be reborn in families that either they can manage or they can transcend easily. Look at people like Ramana Maharshi and others who left their family at a very early time. Jesus himself was said to have left his mother and father when he was 14 or so. So follow the example. These are exemplars we're talking about, not saviors. If you have to look at them as saviors, then how far have you fallen might be the next question you should ask yourself. But if you can think about their stature, then how high can I raise myself should be the follow-up question, using them as examples, not saviors. Here's some more. From Luke, he says, "None of you can be my disciple who does not give up his own possessions." So you can see across the board why I'm putting these charts next to each other, that many of these sayings, a few of them particularly on both the side of Shankara and Vishishta, relate what is being said by these apostles of Jesus and what they heard from him. Again, "And the man said, 'Lord, first let me bury my father, then I will follow you.' But Jesus replied, 'Let the dead bury their dead. You come with me to proclaim the kingdom of God.'" So Sri Ramakrishna, the Ramakrishna order, has stories in the lineage from all the way back to Sri Ramakrishna's time and Holy Mother's time that has to do with people who said they were going to renounce the world, but it was not done. They were only faking, as it were. So in this way you can see how people will get involved with tying up their affairs, and then those very affairs will tie them up. Oh wait, I have to go bury my dead father, or I have to get my daughter married, I'll have to do this. I'm sorry, holy person, I'll come to you later. Doesn't happen. See? So when the Lord calls you, right there, you should follow. And that's the clarion call, they call it in spiritual life. That's what you should be hearing. That's Shruti you're hearing right there. Shruti means that which must be heard. If you had the good graces to have heard that call in a lifetime, in any given lifetime, particularly this one, and you didn't follow, then read that over again and again. What Matthew said, that man said to Christ when he had a chance to follow him. In other words, Matthew goes on to say, birds have nests and foxes have holes, but the Son of Man hath no place to lay his head. So, the animals, birds, bees, and animals of the field, there are positive teachings about them too. But using these as negative teachings is also very valuable. Again, Matthew says, and everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or farms for my name's sake will receive many times as much and will inherit eternal life. The thing is that people hear those teachings in Christendom and they haven't left farms, family life, worldly life, daily life. They hear the teaching and they glorify it, but they haven't actually followed the teaching themselves. And that's also happening in other religions. We call it conventional religion. Doesn't matter if it's Hindu or Christian or Jewish. It's the conventional way of things. And don't we find over here that when the great souls describe Jivanmukta, they want you to give up mundane human convention and superficial preoccupations and worldliness. So why don't you listen to them? Then you will not make a mockery of the teachings and run true to your word. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, an elephant's tusks go out, but they should never come back and circle back in. As you know, these rogue elephants that go crazy and kill people is from a tusk going out and it curves naturally. But as the old elephant grows older, its body gets older, sometimes they curl and go right back into its jawbone and its skull and keeps growing and piercing. And so these elephants go crazy. So Sri Ramakrishna is not talking about beware of elephants. He had a couple stories about that. He's talking about a man's word must go out, and he should never have to take them back. If your word is your word, and you should stay firm with that, and you should never have to take them back for any reason. Luke says, and we've heard this one before, for what will it profit a man if he should gain the whole world but lose his soul? Very good saying to meditate on. Timothy says, guard what has been entrusted to you, avoiding the world and its empty chatter, and the opposing arguments of what is falsely called knowledge. So here we go on with this idea about aparavidya, or lower knowledge, and how people guard that, but they let spiritual knowledge go to seed. Just disperse. They don't covet it at all. Only what will make them money and fame, those things they're interested in. Only what they can support their family with, that's their excuse, you see. Oh, I have a responsibility and duty to my family. But Vivekananda, who is a free soul, says duty is the midday sun that's burning the very vitals of humanity. It's a morbid dream, give it up. So this sense of duty you have, he said actually, it's helpful for a time, but then it's a morbid dream after a while, you must give it up. So this is, again, in accord with knowledge, staying in one place and not going anywhere. See, if knowledge is, you're always raising yourself from lower to higher knowledge, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma, we say it all the time when we chant. So if you're really in alignment with that, you have to make sure this knowledge culminates in truth. And that's done by spiritual disciplines and sadhana. Here's another short one. Seek thee first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all things will be added unto thee. Matthew had so many nice sayings about that. He was obviously attentive to Christ's teachings, especially the ones about renunciation. And finally, one that's pregnant for unwrapping. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but give unto the Lord what is the Lord's. Spiritual things, such as worship and obedience, give those to God. For these he demands from you as his right, and by so doing you will offend neither God nor Caesar. It's good to put those last words on that quote, tag them on there and make sure we remember them. Of course, Jesus was in the temple at that time, and he was outraged about monies being mixed in, worldly life being mixed in with contemplative life. So that's how low Judaism had fallen at the time in that part of the world. So you see here that Jesus wanted to make sure that you didn't offend the powers of the world, if you could avoid that, sort of placating the corpse with dead crumbs, Ramakrishna used to say. If you sat on a corpse at midnight and its mouth opens horribly because of the pressure on the chest cavity, then, and that's a tantric practice you're doing, then you just put some grams and rice in the mouth there and appease the spirit, and then go on with your meditation, which gets you over the fear of death. It's a powerful tantric practice they do in India. But he's not talking about that. He's talking more about how you placate your family. See? So they'll leave you alone so that you can practice spiritual life, because they're not interested. And that's why you separate father from son, mother from daughter. That's why he would come to do that, because he knew the father wasn't interested and the son was, or vice versa. The father was interested and the son wasn't. It's flip-flops every generation, doesn't it, as they say? So you have to be on guard and watch this, and a great soul is always doing that, particularly a Jivan Mukta, because why else would he come back? See, if not to be on guard for you. Does he have anything to earn here, or any desire? Didn't you read my lips or read my chart? Free of desires and so forth? Why would he come back then? So a quick trip in Vedanta through one of the other religions and some of the points that go very well with Vedanta, especially Advaita Vedanta, the transcendent non-dual stance. That's also there in Christianity and Judaism, and of course in Islam and so forth. But India has really focused on it and brought it forward very much so. So in the remaining time, let's go back and in the first half here, because this is our last class on this particular subject. And then, of course, I should announce that I'll be gone for 3 weeks. There'll be 4 Sundays, but you can catch those live streamings on Sunday in San Francisco next Sunday after next. Next Sunday is off as we prepare for our journey. And then the Dharma journey goes to San Francisco first and then to Portland. And you can catch 4 live streaming classes on that trip, Saturday and Sunday. And they're at 9:30 in the morning, Pacific Standard Time. So you tune in with us like that. Of course, you can always, and many people are, watching these YouTubes and these classes after they're already given and turning into them later. That's good study. And also checking your notes, watch them several times. Let's go back then to Swami Aseshanandaji's teachings here and see where else it will lead us. We've taken the first top 4. Now here's a good one. Western man accepts objective experience only. However, if you look in meditation behind the phenomenal universe, you will see the infinite spirit, the eternal subject, the divine mother. So Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj used to say, you're preoccupying yourself too much with the objective. Don't be so attached to the objective object. Be more attached to the eternal subject. So there's the eternal subject, which is actually you in Advaita Vedanta. You are that thou art. But as you put your energy out through the prana into the body and senses, you become convinced that you're matter. You're the body, you're the senses, your objects, your pleasure is real, the world is real, and so forth. And so you forget this background consciousness that's doing, projecting, this mind that's projecting. This mind turned inward becomes Brahman. This mind going outward becomes the world. So it's all a matter of which way you're turning that energy, that Shakti, that prana, your attention, your concentration. And that's a very key point to practice, to correct practice, or what Lord Buddha called right orientation. So again, Western man accepts objective experience only. So he's not aware of God as the subject, Divine Mother as the subject, also not aware of himself as the subject. He's not aware that if he were to find himself, he can then make that one with Brahman. I and my Father are one, you see. So the ego self, I, turns into the true self, Atman, and that Atman turns and merges itself with Brahman. And so there's really only one I. This is why he's saying, give up this idea of I, me, and mine. And Jivan Mukta doesn't hold that. It goes for immersion. So with that said, and with the hopefully enough time left, because it's not a huge study, it would be very nice then to show you a teaching that right now is escaping me. And there it is. And this one I bring you in full color so that we can have the bliss of viewing here. Remember, we're looking at Western man accepts objective experience only, but if you look in meditation behind the phenomenal universe, you will see this eternal subject. And so I wanted to show you this as we were talking about the Jivan Mukta, about non-duality and duality. There are these two practices people do. One's called prayer, and one's called meditation. And when I started off this class this afternoon, I said that you probably don't have a meditation practice if you're common Westerner, ordinary Westerner, because you would only get that if you found an Eastern man. An Eastern man would have said, oh, don't you meditate or have a practice? Here, I'm a Taoist. Here, I'm a Buddhist. Here, I'm a Vedantist. Here, I'm a practitioner of Raja Yoga. Any of those will teach you meditation, you see. Meditation is really the main thing. So you probably don't have that, then you have to fall back on what? Prayer, dualistic. And if you fall back on prayer, as far as he's concerned, you're looking at a post-mortem emancipation. You're looking at praying to someone who's outside of yourself to attain a state that will happen after your death. And he was very big on pointing this out. Rather than meditation, then you could unite the self with the self, smaller self with the greater self, which we just explained very nicely. So this is very powerful teachings. Let's look at this chart in the remaining 10 minutes. If we don't quite finish it, we can take it up in the first part of the second half. But we are making good headway here in this final class, looking at this whole idea of Advaita Vedanta in a Jivan Mukta. Now this chart, based on a painting of a friend of mine in India who offered this, is called Meditation and Prayer, and I put it together from my own experiences and from some of the teachings. Therefore, there's a quote here at the beginning that I put. Both prayer and meditation are crucial to spiritual life. The former, that is prayer, connects the soul to the ideal in form, called the Ishtam, and the latter establishes the aspirant in formless reality, called Brahman. So they both have these own territories. The danger common to both is selfishness. For the ego mars prayer and meditation if there is the slightest sense of unripe individuality or personal gain associated with their respective practices. So, with that saying then, I wanted to prove it and flesh it out by these positive benefits in meditation and advantages, and these limitations in meditation and advantages, also the same with prayer. So let's look first at benefits of meditation. It bestows objectivity on the seeking mind. So it can step back and get objective view. Meditation is very good for that, because usually you're so involved in life, right? And then all of a sudden you You say, well, somebody teaches me to meditate. All right, empty your mind of everything that happened to you. Don't think about any object and so forth. You'll get those teachings, and all of a sudden you'll find out there is an eternal subject behind the scenes. You're it, but you probably will not realize that right away. But as you have that experience, you are courting that freedom that's to come to you as a Jivan Mukta by simply just sitting in meditation and watching. It hones the power of right discrimination. So I won't jump to prayer right now as a contrast, but just to say, stay in the subject of meditation, that discrimination and meditation together, the yogas of Dhyan Yoga or Raja Yoga and the yoga of Jnana Yoga, Dhyan and Gyan, are just a beautiful combination to put together. Study the scriptures will set your mind right about the truth. Will take your lower knowledge to higher knowledge position, then meditate, and you've got this unbeatable combination that I'd say neither devotion nor work can really equal. They both have their contributions, but nothing will be so swift as putting together higher wisdom, discrimination, with meditation. It's an unbeatable combination. Increases the ability for mature detachment. And that's one of the reasons why. Because when you meditate upon things that you thought were real, and they're proven to you in meditation to be not so real, or maybe outright unreal, then you will detach from them naturally. You won't have to actually practice vairagya. You will become a vairagi. You will actually detach from things almost as a matter of course, like they say. Introduces the subtle presence of non-duality. That's really important because you don't know about non-duality yet because you've just been praying or you've thought you've been under the auspice of a savior or of a particular religion that was keeping you in one narrow compartment of yourself, and you haven't heard yet about this open, free space beyond all religion. I'm quoting, of course, Lex Dixon, our founder there, the open space beyond religion. So when you hear about that, all of a sudden you get an inkling, just a trace, like a subtle smell or a subtle taste or a subtle vision of non-duality and what it's like. Come to me and to us in May at Wynwood Waters in up the Columbia River Gorge and sit with us in a retreat called Glimpses of Gaudapada, where we will take non-dual and look at it from all sides we can. That's just in a few weeks. You'll be able to do that with us. Look into that. So the subtle presence of non-duality occurs. Then it also ushers in the incomparable state of samadhi. What over here we were calling indescribable, so I didn't go into it. So we will have to look at that later, and on retreat too. Now those are the benefits, 5 main benefits I could see with meditation, at least in the initial stage. Of course, samadhi would be an advanced stage. Now let's look at, there actually are cautions and limitations of meditation. I've come to know this by watching my own meditations for 50 years and the meditations of other people too, my students, and hearing from other devotees of different religious predilections and paths about their meditations, and getting this objective view and watching. It's very interesting. It can imbalance the mind if it's initially overused. The same with the mantra. Holy Mother used to warn about not meditating too long and not doing the mantra too long, not doing breathing exercise too long, particularly at the beginning. And we have these people coming out of the West who have big eyes and small stomachs, spiritually speaking. And they'll go on these 30-day meditation retreats and just blow their mind out of the water. And I hope that isn't harming their spiritual life. In some cases, I think it is. On the other hand, you have these people who have practiced meditation for 30 or 40 years and aren't making any advancement. So those are 2 kinds of spiritual impediments there Patanjali talks about in yoga. See, about not making enough spiritual advancement and falling back after you make some advancement, getting in a habit of taking one step forward and falling 2 steps back. Those are teachings in Yoga Darshana. So you have to be careful of that. 2, can contribute to the growth of the spiritual ego, the prayer. The meditation. Your ego can become inflated by getting these initial views of itself and the marvelous powers that are there. Actually, that's one of the ways where people get swept away towards occult powers rather than to the great powers of God. There are 6 great powers of God, and there are 8 lower occult powers. And people get swept away from these wonderful powers of the Lord and get swept up into these siddhas. That was also mentioned back here, right? It goes beyond the cities and transcends the world and power of powers. So that's brought up here as a potential danger in meditation. Also, may lull the mind into the habit of complacency. So your meditations can become kind of pedantic and plodding. And you just do the same thing every day, and then you tell your teacher, yes, I'm doing the practice. And you think to yourself, I've done my practice today, I can just go back to work now. And I can do all this and that and get involved in family and watch how the father and son get separated over time, and I can't do anything about it. My son becomes alienated to me, and pretty soon my meditations, aren't getting me anywhere. So you have to be careful of that danger. No complacency allowed. You have to keep it fresh and like your breath, to always breathe consciously, right? Same way you have to do your actions and your meditations. And that's probably the only way you're going to learn how to do action in inaction, as Krishna mentions in the Gita. That's more Advaitic. Number 4, might disturb or stymie the path of action. I've seen this directly in some of my students. They get the teachings on meditation and the mantra and so forth, and they say, I think I want to give up the world right away. Because they have these wonderful experiences in meditation early on. And children are very much like that too. They're very much open to meditation. And so people who are brand new meditators, probably based on the fact that they had meditation in their previous life and they liked it, all of a sudden it gets reintroduced to them in this life, and immediately have remembrance of their past lifetime meditations, and all comes forward at once. Then they run into the same habit again that they did in their past lifetime, where their meditation didn't culminate in samadhi. And all of a sudden in this lifetime they run into that same habit again. You see them 2 months later, their meditations have gone sour. So they started off with visions and light, and a couple months later they're just dull, and they can't meditate anymore. So that's a danger, and it's also a very good teaching to watch out for the apt meditator. Final, and then we'll take our break, can keep the meditator from full realization. Meditation itself can become the goal, but that's dhyan, right? The yamas, niyamas, and then asana, pratyahara, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, but what's 8th? Is samadhi. So the meditator can just stay a kind of professional meditator and never have samadhi, which is another reason why that person may in this lifetime welcome meditation into their life, but again fall into this inability to get non-dual samadhi. Then, as we end our first half here, Sri Ramakrishna says, do you know what authentic meditation is like? One thinks of nothing else but God. The mind becomes like oil flowing easily into a pure receptacle. So mind is one beaker of oil, and God is another beaker. And so you pour the mind, that oil, in a perfect rainbow stream without a splash from your mind into Brahman. And that's how Sri Ramakrishna called it. It's called Taila Dara Dhyan in India, a well-known form of meditation. So here we will break and we'll look at the advantages and downside to prayer next when we come back after 15 minutes. Namaste. we here have all had our break with a little prasad fruit. We're refreshed and ready for one more hour of Dharma teachings. I hope all of you are still with us, and more are joining all the time. We look back on these classes and find out we have people watching from England and Australia and Holland and Hungary and other points around the world, India of course, so it's very good to see that and see that people are taking in the Dharma in this particular form, Indian Dharma. So we had just finished half of the chart in color here on my left, meditation and prayer, and we looked at the advantages and the potential drawbacks of meditation. So as long as those are kept in mind, a person can take full advantage of that important practice. Make sure you reap the benefits and just keep an eye out for those dangers. Same with prayer. I looked at it, and of course when I was young and as a Westerner, I was taught to pray a little by my mother. I actually asked for it. So it's like this statement up here of at the top of the chart is that prayer can connect you with your Ishtam. Now, usually we use our Ishtam to meditate upon in Vedanta, but there are many cases of people getting into inner communion and darshan, wanting something deep and profound. Usually when the Vedantist prays to an Ishtam and there's any kind of a wish involved, asking, it's not for fame and money and so forth and so on. It's for the increase of devotion or for a good teacher or a way to find truth and higher wisdom. Those kinds of things are things that people pray for in Vedanta, and they will have to connect themselves with God in form to do that, because Brahman has no ears. Actually, at the end of the class, we'll look at these inscrutable epithets of Brahman that Swami Aseshanandaji mentions, and that'll be a good way to cap off this entire 5-class series. But in the meantime, I'm using that as an idea and teaching that prayer is most effective for. It establishes a connection with Ishvara then. That's the first one, as was said up here at the top of this chart. Helps in the development of peace of mind. So people usually feel better after they pray. Just like the body feels better after it swims or exercises, the mind will feel better after it engages in some effective and meaningful prayer. And I'm sure people are advanced enough to know, if they're turning into a Dharma class, what meaningless prayer is all about or what selfish prayer is about. Remember up here I said in this quote myself, selfishness is one of the problems of both of these. If you can do away with the ego in meditation and do away with the ego in prayer, then all of the clarity will be there and reap much higher benefits from it. So that has to be an overall teaching in this. It strengthens faith in the chosen ideal. Faith, of course, in Vedanta is called Shraddha, and it's it's one of the 6 jewels. It's just penultimate to gaining a Jivan Mukta kind of state. So faith has to be strengthened, broadened, heightened, deepened. In all those ways, your faith in both your Ishtam and in the existence of Brahman as your very self is what the Vedantist and the non-dual meditator will be looking for. And of course, that's going to do away with all of the distractions of life. My teacher in that regard used to say it'll make fear afraid of itself. It'll put death in its own grave. So that's, of course, going to be a wonderful boon for the meditator to understand that and achieve it. Number 4, it affords communion with God with form. And so for people whose temperament is really geared more toward the formless, it's often a welcome thing to go to a worship or a puja or some form of dualistic worship, because they already have a kind of formless background in their mind. So why not take advantage of those things? They'll be much richer as a result. There was a story of 2 friends who parted, and one friend found out that the other friend got enlightenment. And so he went across the country for a long ways to find him, found him in a hut, went into the hut, knocked on the door, and this servant answered and said, he's engaged right now in worshipping his guru's slippers. He'll be right here. So the man was sitting outside and thinking, but he got enlightenment. Why is he still doing worship and putting flowers on his guru's slippers and all of that? But he didn't say anything. So his friend came out, they embraced, and then he started talking. And in the course of the conversation, the friend said, I hear that you gained enlightenment. That's wonderful. We must talk about it if you can, but I have a question. I came and you're doing worship still. Why is that if you're enlightened? Why do you need to do worship? God with form, and God beyond form, basically. And the man said, well, I do everything else from an enlightened state. Why not do that too? So Sri Ramakrishna used to tell this story that nothing really changes in enlightenment. It just gets richer. Everything is the same because the same Atman is everything, but you're now seeing that same Atman in everything, and before you weren't. So all of life becomes richer. Your senses become more attuned. Your palate, your ears, what you see, all more meaningful. The objects become more beautiful. Nature becomes more beautiful. And of course, right on into the inner climes of spiritual peripheries and territories inside of you, much more open and light-filled. So why not do that too? So again, I'm saying it will afford even the non-dualist an opportunity to see what a puja is really about, to have communion with the Son of the Father, to have darshan with Divine Mother in form. A lot of the great non-dualists had these experiences before they became non-dualists. So it's possible to also have them after, in a richer way. So number 5, and finally, leads naturally to direct meditation in God. So that would be an added and extra attribute, that it will help you actually meditate on the formless reality, to have this connection through prayer, through meaningful prayer, deep meaningful prayer. The whole language that we use in the West, in our particular narrow way of looking at religion, you could say, oh, please God, make me a better person. But if God could talk to you, you'd say, but you're not a person. You and I are the same. Your person is the ego. Give up your personality. Realize your true self. So any prayer that we can fashion is based on this old way of thinking. And that's why you need to put deep, meaningful prayer together with higher meditation so that you're better informed. Your prayers will then be better informed. And of course, this is a whole way of lifting the mind ego complex out of selfishness of any kind, even the slightest trace of selfishness. Let's look at the disadvantages of prayer. Weakens the soul if based on gifts and boons. Remember, aparigraha is one of the very first of all yamas and niyamas in yoga. Not giving gifts, not receiving gifts is a very powerful thing because it keeps you involved in commerce with the world. You want to, at least at will, at times, lift yourself away from commerce and focus on God, don't you? Off the world, into God. So if the soul's very relations with God are based in gifts and boons, then aren't you still involved in the world? Because the God is objectless, is the eternal subject, as we were saying. The infernal object and the eternal subject. That's what I often said. So it doesn't make sense. It doesn't mix. Also, a disadvantage is that prayer increases dependency on external powers. The power of prayer, miracles. We were just looking at that a lot. I notice a certain cross-section of people who even come to Vedanta still have this very strong desire for healing and for miracles and for sensational outward show. And spiritual life is not like that. It's all inward. All the beautiful things are inward. When they become externalized, they become cheapened. They become open to defilement. And that's why you keep your mantra secret. It's why you keep your experiences and meditation secret, and only share them with certain, like your guru and so forth, and only do so in order to advance inwardly. So people are still attached very much to the outward powers. We just see that in Shankara's rendering of a Jivan Mukta, is that you go beyond the siddhis, the powers. And so that comes deeper here in this teaching. It fosters attachment to form, rites, and rituals. That's a big no-no in India, because India has done so many rites and rituals, more than any other country, and has done them for thousands of years, until finally their own scriptures began to say, we found out that we were binding ourselves to the gods when we did that. We created very good relations with them, but then we became theirs, and we forgot that we are one with that reality which is beyond the gods. So by binding ourselves to the gods, who are overseeing cycles of time, we are binding ourselves into cycles of time, you see. So we didn't know that we actually came straight from Brahman, and we can go straight back to Brahman, and these are intermediaries. And if you pray to them and propitiate them in the best way, with care, then they can give you, it would be the mulch cow of your desire, you see, like they say. And then you'll be fine. But you must realize that that getting attached to rites and rituals is a kind of deep, dark hell. I think the Ishavasya Upanishad says that in some of its opening slokas. So why did they say that? Back earlier we were saying the non-dualists can actually enjoy a puja and a worship because their mind is in a non-dual state naturally. But if a person's only in a dualistic state and hasn't had the experience or doesn't know about the non-dual Brahman, then they can become caught in these cycles of ritual. Fourth, and penultimately, prayer maintains a sense of duality and dualism in you. Of course, good segue because I just mentioned that. So beyond duality is qualified non-dualism. Beyond qualified non-dualism is non-dualism, Advaita. These three plateaus, which Vivekananda discovered and brought back to us, he describes in terms of, in India, of Madhva, Ramanuj, and Shankara, each propounding their own view. And he said they're all fine for the followers of each one. They're steps, though. And he always, of course, encouraged you to climb the steps so you could find out what non-dualism is. And then you wouldn't be caught just on the lower steps, or the middle step. So that's important to have this highest view. Then you can come back down the steps, he said, and bring this light with you. You can bring light of formlessness into the rites and rituals that were being made boring, ritualistic, plodding, pedantic, and limiting. You could bring that very light into it once you'd had the formless state of experience, you see. So again, up and down these staircase. And finally, prayer can cause forgetfulness of formless reality. If the world is not a proof of that, then there's probably no better proof anywhere, is that people are caught pretty much en masse in dualistic ways of religion and thinking. And the I and my Father are one sometimes is left only for one Savior, one being. But thousands of beings have had this experience of oneness too. And the avatars are like stars in the sky, Swami Aseshanandaji used to say. It's very limited thinking to think there's only one star in the sky. So this also has to be taken in a more universal way. And that's bridging on the project that if we had a sixth class in this series, I would be going towards Swami Aseshananda's teachings on universality and showing you some other charts on it. But here again, we conclude this fine chart on some advantages and disadvantages of both these crucial spiritual practices called meditation and prayer. Now let's move on and look at a new chart of maybe look at a few of those and just read a few, because it's always good to keep referring to Swami Aseshananda here. And he was my guru and my mantra guru. He did give me initiation into the mantra and to the Ramakrishna order. And he used to teach much about the guru being a principle and not a personality. So that's very pure. The Ramakrishna order has kept that very pure. In fact, I'm wearing the cloth that Swami Virupakshananda gave me today, because I found out just today that he had passed away in India. And I've just seen him in Chengalput, that's below Chennai, down south of India, just a few months ago. So I saw him, luckily, just before he passed away, suffering some respiratory disorders for years. And he had retired from the leadership of that Chengalput ashram, and was still there when I was there, and he was almost dancing when I saw him. He was getting himself about the room and is animated. So anyway, I salute him because he was so helpful to SRV and so encouraging to us, and so I think about him when I think about gurus, and of course in the Ramakrishna order there's just one guru, that's Sri Ramakrishna himself, and then there's the Divine Mother, that's Holy Mother, and then of course there's the great Swami, who's the exemplar of the best of the monastic side. So we have that Trinity, our own Trinity there, and kind of lifts the mind high, like these teachings of meditation. You want to get a nirvikalpa samadhi from meditation. It was said here, it leads the mind towards higher nirvikalpa samadhi, so it feels sort of like that when you think about it. Aham nirvikalpo nirakara rupo vibhutva cha sarvatra sarvendriyanam nacha sangatam naiva muktir nameyas chirananda rupa shivoham shivoham. Shankara sings in his Nirvana Shatkam, the very last verse of those 6 verses. I have no form, no fancy. The all-pervading am I. Everywhere I exist, yet I am beyond the senses. Neither salvation am I, nor anything that can be known. I am pure consciousness. I am Shiva. I am Shiva. So right in line with the teachings we just had, no form, no fancy, and beyond the senses, and not salvation, because salvation always, he says, presumes a post-mortem emancipation, that I'm going to be free later. But my freedom is right now, because freedom is now, in this eternal moment, in this very moment, and that's how Lord Shiva lives, in this very moment. The eternal moment, not the present. They make a distinction between the present that people say they live in and the eternal moment. Past, present, and future all belong to Maya in cycles of time. I'm better now, I'm not so good anymore. I'm healthy, now I'm not healthy. I'm living, now I'm not living, and so forth. All the dualities get put on their ear and set aside when you achieve this non-dual state. And he sings about it there and transmits a sense of it to us, to our minds, even by hearing those words. There's a transformation behind them. Like Swami Aseshanandaji says here about Swamiji, and we should go there next, that even just thinking about him purifies your samskaras. Even if you just look at Swami Vivekananda, a picture of him will purify your samskaras. So he says here in terms of the guru, what we were just talking about, in order to realize truth, a guru plays a very important part. A guru is not a mere man. Guru is a state of consciousness. That state of consciousness is timeless. That state of consciousness is non-dual. That state of consciousness is the state which makes Advaita not a philosophy, but an experience. So well put by Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj, who had as his gurus, his Param Guru, Sri Ramakrishna, his Parapara Guru, or his Param Guru, his Mantra Guru, Holy Mother, and of course Sri Ramakrishna, his ultimate Guru. But then he had Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj too, as his Guru, who helped him. So he had a very good sense of what Guru is, as he says here, is a state of consciousness, not just a personality, but also and mainly a principle. There are many places to go with these quotes. Let's try this one. We adore Swami Vivekananda because, like a lion, he came out of the cage. To come out of the cage of Maya, called time, space, and causation, you have to purify your subconscious mind. For that, you'll need an illumined teacher. Just to see him will purify your mind by making your samskaras sattvic. Right? Just to see him. And I think he meant not just to see him in person, which was a rarity for many of us, of course, but in this lifetime, but actually to see a picture of him, because we see his pictures even on charts and on the altar, and he just penetrates through all other appearances, and he's there for you. He's totally present. So in that regard, we love him because, like a lion, he came out of a cage. So we have to give up being you. See, is this you? Spelled E-W-E. And we have to look at us before we took on the Vedanta and after. Before, we're this little meek being, and afterwards we're this lion of Vedanta like he was. And you can see that that then becomes the best description for someone like Swami Vivekananda. So when I heard that from Swami Aseshananda, I looked up as many of the lion quotes as I could about Swami Vivekananda. He said many himself. Let's just read some of them from this chart, which I call the course of Atmic realization. First of all, he says, have faith in yourself. We just talked about faith in prayer, right, and how it helps it. All power is in you. Be conscious and bring it out. Those two sentences are beautiful. All power is in you. Be conscious and bring it out. You'll need faith to do that. Even if you are at your last breath, be not afraid, but work on with the trepidity of a lion, but at the same time with the tenderness of a flower. Swami Vivekananda. So we see it's the way he used to inspire people with his words and his letters. He wrote to people like this to keep them on the spiritual cusp, always rising. Also, he says, what I want is muscles of iron and nerves of steel, inside which dwells a mind of the same material as that of which the thunderbolt is made of. Nice, we said that today when we just had Mother Kali's wisdom thunder rumbling a couple hours ago above us. So it's a good connection for us. Our mind must be made of the same material as that thunderbolt. Loud, that is, broad, and broadcasting the Vedanta to everyone. Reading all his lion quotes here, the next one is, Guru Bhakti is the foundation of all spiritual development. That's, of course, faith and devotion in your teacher. The Guru Bhakta will conquer the world. This is the one evidence of history. It is faith that makes a lion of a man. So again, you can see, and that's why I put this set of qualities here. These are some of the famous ones. His favorite, I would say, that he was mentioning over and over again in his letters. I've studied his book of letters, and from it I created that book called Swami Vivekananda Vijnana Gita. Put that together in chapters on these particular qualities. So you see them up here. We won't go through them all today. We can mention them, but we have gone through them before. And these are some of these things like faith and fearlessness. At the bottom of the chart he says in another lion quote, let there be but a dozen such lion souls in each country, lions who have broken their own bonds, who have touched the infinite, whose whole soul has gone to Brahman, who care neither for wealth nor power nor fame, and these will be enough to shake the world. pretty much right there you have what the Jivan Mukta has transcended, right? Wealth, power, fame. You probably couldn't, an I, me, and mine that surrounds wealth, power, and fame, you probably couldn't have a better description of the ignorant, egotistical person, of which the world and the societies in the world today are full of. They're interested in those things, and sometimes those things alone. And this is why I showed the teachings of Jesus, who said you must separate father from son and mother from daughter, and where members of your family might be your own enemies. Not outright enemies, they might be smiling at you and very friendly to you. At the same time, they're trying to pull you into what? Power, wealth, and fame, because that's what they're into. But who's into spiritual life? Who's into spiritual discrimination? Who's into detaching from wealth, power, and fame? Who's into getting enlightenment? Who's into finding a guru? Who's into taking a mantra? Who's into following through with spiritual practices that will make them enlightened? Precious few. Jesus, his followers, Ramakrishna, his apostles, Buddha, his 50 arhats or so, at the time he was there at the end of his life. So you'll find those beings are most interested in things that are of the highest value. Now, a quick list then. Guru Bhakti, devotion to the teacher, he mentions all the time. Shakti Vandana, worship of the Divine Mother. This is a new facet in today's world. Bringing the Mother out from hiding. And of course, since we have Sri Sharda Devi as Swami Aseshanandaji's mantra guru, then it becomes all more prominent to us in the West that she was a living manifestation of the goddess. Even Sri Ramakrishna called her that. Kshatriya Virya, that is, you must have this strength of a warrior in terms of that. At the retreat last weekend we were talking about that, how you have to work with the strength of a lion, but the intrepidity of a lion, but the fragrance of a flower, the gentleness of a flower. That's the kind of soul he was. That's just great, bold fearlessness, but non-violent. You put these Sri Durga type of dualities together that on the outside can be very brazen and bold, and the other side can be very, very gentle and sweet. You put those together somehow in the same personality, and then you have this idea of a lion who thinks he's a kitten, and once a sheep. Is this you? And then turned into a mouse, and finally grew into a lion again. So never forget the self. The lion would be this list. He goes on to say, Brahma Tejas. God realized brilliance. Tejas means light. It's the kind of light that if you eat your food and say mantra over it, and prayer, and with exercises bring that energy up the spine, and then subject it to mantra and spiritual practices, that it will turn into tejas and ojas. These are teachings in the Kundalini Yoga system and in yoga in general. And it will shine out of your pores then. And that's the explanation why you saw a halo around Jesus and why you saw Buddha shine. His devotees said this about these beings because tejas was shining out of them. There is a good explanation for that. It's not a miracle. It's spiritual practice done over time to reach culmination in a realized soul. So give up miracles and siddhis and take to these great teachers and their teachings. Ishtanishta, one-pointed focus on God. We just said in the prayer chart about prayer back here that prayer connects you with your ishtam. So ishtanishta means have one-pointed focus on your ishtam. And see God and Guru as one, as we were just saying over here, right? The Guru is a principle. That's God in human form, walking around in a human body. You can see how Swami Aseshanandaji's quotes will all connect and verify each other, all support each other in one continuous cycle of connection. Vyahritis, Sanskrit means connections you need to make inward. Very powerful teachings in the Adhyatma Upanishad and others. You need fearlessness. He mentions it all the time. Spiritual life is not for the weak. So the weakness is really, if there's any sin in India, it would be weakness. Sometimes he would Say weakness is a form of ignorance. So that has to be cut out of you, and you have to turn in from this weakness, to who you are, your true nature. Ahimsa, non-aggression. At the same time you're bold, you must be peaceful and non-aggressive, and not hurt others in thought, word, and deed. So that's precious to all spiritual seekers, and it's rare in the world to see people who are non-violent. And non-aggressive. You see, I'm going to go there to that country and I'm going to take over. Whether it's I'm going to do it with war machine or I'm going to do it with business, it's still a form of aggression. You're competing with them, you're going there to take their money, and that's, as far as the society is concerned, okay. And if it's not okay, I got a couple lawyers behind me that will make it okay. You see, it's worldly life and it's negativity. So you must give those things up. Be non-aggressive and peaceful, and win over people's hearts with the light of your own Brahma Tejas. See? This is a whole spiritual way of proceeding. Tyaga, it's based on mature renunciation. Immature renunciation is going to send the world to hell in a handbasket, and you don't care. But mature renunciation is going to make you a jivan mukta who comes back and helps the world. Holy Mother once said that you've all of you, my children, have seen Sri Ramakrishna now, and he's your Ishtam. See, so now you're going to him, you have no worries whatsoever. Now, on your way to see him, just turn and help others. See, you have time here. You found your goal early in life, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Now, as you go towards him, try and help as you can along the way. That's the way she put it. Brahmagyanam. Swami Aseshanandaji would always say that word in almost every lecture. Atmagyan or Brahmagyan, supreme wisdom, needs to mature in your mind. That's, of course, we've said enough about that today, going from lower knowledge to higher knowledge, or just from knowledge to wisdom to truth. However you want to put it, those are very important steps to take inward in yourself. And here we had this mentioned in the Jivan Mukta chart, where both Vashishta and Shankara put it in their list of qualities of a Jivan Mukta, Samasta Chitta. He calls it here, universal mind. You have this, and also Samadarshitvam, equal vision towards all. Those are two facets of a realized soul, like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Swami Vivekananda. They had both a universal mind where they loved all religion and saw the essence the same in them, and also equal vision towards all beings, whether they were low caste, no caste, or higher caste. They had equal vision to all those beings. Quick view and a quick trip through this course of Atmic realization. Time's a wasting, the hourglass says. So we need to move on in our inward trajectory towards this higher truth. And now, let's look at this second. It's actually probably the fifth of these 10 charts, maybe the sixth we've looked at in this 5-class series. And I want to take a few of these quotes from it so that we can look at one or two other connected teachings. Here's a good way to start it off. When the West accepts Meister Eckhart, then they will understand Advaita Vedanta, not before. Meister Eckhart was one of those early Christian beings, I would call them fathers, that had the non-dual side of spirituality in mind and in realization too. Not just the dual, and we've just looked at that already with prayer and meditation, but when a being has right orientation in their prayer, then connects with Ishtam through sincere prayer, then you get to the Father, to the Son. See, that's the connection. Before that, you don't get to the Father because you're stopping at the Son, but you're going to the Son and you're asking the Son of the Father, what's the Father like? What's formless reality like? I've heard of non-dual meditation. Oh, here, have some of it, my son. Son of the Son. And you get this beautiful experience of non-duality, where you are the light. This happens to a lot of people, not just seers. So when that happens, then all of a sudden you become aware of something that's beyond the Trinity. Let's go on here. In the face of the Church Fathers, Meister Eckhart stated that one must go beyond the Trinity. That created trouble for him. See, they wanted to ostracize him when he was speaking that kind of anti-church. It sounded anti-religious to them. Quote, beyond the Trinity, unquote, means the impersonal God. The Church Fathers knew nothing about that. Yet Christ talked about the Logos, the Word of God, and how it was one with God. God the Father is the uncaused cause, is the unmoved mover. So how Swami Aseshanandaji takes these beautiful teachings of Christ, and the fathers that followed him, like Meister Eckhart, very few, but there were some, and turned them towards this teaching of the unmoved mover. And for that I wanted to show you, and I brought another color version of it, this chart on immutable epithets. Inscrutable epithets. It works either way. So let us look at this inscrutable epithets chart and see how some enigmas are there, some dichotomies. Inscrutable, enigma, dichotomy. We look in English for these words that and teachings that just seem to run against themselves and cause this kind of, the mind to kind of stop, you see. So they're very good statements, and he uses two of them there. Uncaused cause, you can see it there in the upper right hand middle arm. I have to say, there's a lot of arms there. And then he also uses here the unmoved mover. You can see across the board on the upper left hand middle arm. And above that, the inactive agent. So you can see how all of these are dichotomous hippopotamus statements. They're running against each other. There's something that's sort of disenchanting if you put your mind on them. They will take you out of hypnotism and make you think beyond the box. So they're good for dualists and qualified non-dualists to ponder. Of course, the non-dualists would probably already had experience of formless reality, or at least are entertaining it more deeply than others, then they will have an immediate sense of the significance of these kinds of statements, the uncaused cause. So, cause we know, and I could bring out the causality and origins charts here, and we could go through another 3 hours on it, but cause goes all the way back to the uncaused cause, but then there's also what's called a primal cause, and there's immediate cause. There's a whole different level of causes that go step-like back into and their effects. Cause and effect all goes back in. It's not just in science that cause and effect has any kind of sweep and presence, but back in the mind, cause and effect goes very deep. So you could take apart any one of these. Inactive agent really means, and if you look down below here, you see all of these people dancing in this nice fresco here. People dancing in kirtan, singing with drums and singing the names of the Lord. Above that is the uninvolved participant. So that's another kind of connection to this top one, the top and the bottom both. Uninvolved participant and the inactive agent both relate to this formless Brahman, to this Advaitic state we're talking about, where everything is moved by this unmoved mover. See, how to explain it? Vegetables are dancing in a pot, Sri Ramakrishna says, and the boy tells the mother, "Look at the vegetables dancing." And the mother says, "Oh, they're not dancing of their own accord, son. The water's making them dance." Then the father comes in and tells the mother and the son, "Actually, it's not the water that's making them dance, it's the heat that's causing the water to cause them to dance." The grandfather then comes in and says, "Actually, that heat's connected to gas that runs through pipes." And it all goes like this, you see, in the house that Jack built. And so we find out there's an effect to every a cause to every effect, and we step back like that in cause and effect form, like Samkhya Yoga did with the 24 cosmic principles, and we find out that at the head of it all is the unmoved mover, the uncaused cause, the inactive agent. What other epithets can we find for that great being, that great principle? The unseen seer is often mentioned. So you can take any of the five senses first and put it beyond the senses, yet the senses are operating because of its presence, just like the vegetables are dancing because of the gas flowing from the gas company through pipes in the streets far away. But there are many secondary and connected causes that are causing that effect. So in the case of the unseen seer, you can see he's holding one of those pots there with that third eye in it. You see the mother's third eye. The other side is one that we hear a lot, the unstruck sound. And that's why this is mentioned here by Swami Aseshanandaji, that the Christ talked about the Logos, the Word of God. That's what we call the unstruck sound. And it's sort of like Sri Ramakrishna said, a bell sitting there, but nobody striking it. So what's possible in the bell is all this sound, right? Yet it remains silent. Vibration is in the bell too, but the bell isn't vibrating. This is how we must look at all of creation, which of course we would call projection, sankalpa, by billions of minds, is that there's this standing behind it is this word, and it's like this huge bell. And beings are growing up and ringing it according to what power they possess. The Trinity can ring it quite loud. The gods a little bit less. It's like an ant coming up and trying to ring a bell, a huge liberty bell. That would be like human beings trying to understand the unstruck sound that's behind everything. Science rang the bell pretty hard when it understood that everything's based in vibration. They're not putting it in those terms, but everything is vibrating. Molecules, atoms, quarks, neutrons, subatomic particles. It's vibration that's here, and it's only vibration. It's shifting sand. So, but if you went beyond the shifting sand, tiny particles, you'd see there had to be a foundation upon which that vibration was happening. So there's a bell. Once it's struck, tum, T is the first, that's the outgoing force. Ah is the sustaining force. Is the destructive force or the dissolving force. Tam, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. Then the M disappears. Now, what most people looking on or listening, in this case, would think was that the sound of the bell disappeared, and that's called death. You see, birth, life, and death, right? Creation, preservation, destruction. But when the so-called destruction happens, like Sri Ram says, everything returns to its source. Everything that was created, when it's destroyed, really only returns to its source. So that sound goes back into the bell. And it can be struck again and again and again. It's like it's never being struck. So that word is capable of producing worlds of name and form and time and space for countless aeons. And those aeons are falling inside of yugas, and those yugas are falling inside of manvantaras, and so forth. So that it's just one continual cycle. Without end, without middle, and without beginning. All based in vibration, if you want to look at it, just in this one epithet alone. What to speak of action, cause and effect, or seeing. See, all these epithets based on principles that are right here with us right now, in the five senses and in time and space, but yet pointing to their foundation. Finger pointing to the moon, as Lord Buddha said. What else do we have here? The unborn procreator. So all beings come out of Brahman, but it's unborn. You see, Brahman doesn't get born, and doesn't live, and doesn't die. We just chanted that in the Nirvana Shatkam. I have no form, I have no fancy, I have no birth, I have no death. So this points strongly to this idea of an unborn procreator. That is, everything will be born and generated from it, yet it will remain free of all of that process. The acreate creator is similar to that. And I use that word, Swami Vivekananda used that when he came here to the West. He wanted to come up with an English word that pointed to Brahman behind everything. So he said, if you're so big on creation, well, let's just call it acreate. Try and think of something as being acreate. Before it even got into the process of creation, preservation, destruction, it was. And if you look at the first slokas of the Bible, and the first slokas of the first verses of the Bible, and the first slokas of the Rig Veda, and so forth, you'll find that this is stated by them. Even before light and darkness it was. So we're talking about something subtlemost. Anuranian is a Sanskrit word. It's subtlemost. Foundation for everything. Everything knows it not, but it knows everything else. You'll find teachings like that in the Upanishads about it. On the other side of the chart, the unattached lover. Love, impersonal in everything, even right on down to the very personal love, yet unattached. Not attached to nature and form, not in love with it. Only in love is in the self. And that's how it remains with a capital L. It's the formless refuge of everyone. It's the unknowable knower. That is, it knows everything and no one else knows it, as said both in the Upanishads and in the Gita. It's the impersonal presence. All of these inscrutable epithets. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for instance, says, out of the fear of Brahman the wind blows, the sun rises, Indra presides. Indra is the god of all the other gods. So even Indra presides with this power of Brahman. Death bows low to it, and the cosmic sets of fives carry out their respective functions. You know the quintuplication process because I've taught it in depth for a long time here in SRVdom. 5 fingers, 5 toes, 5 elements, 5 senses, 5 pranas, 5 types of pranas, 5-fold mind, and so forth. Inward we march in these sets of fives. The individual soul, going on with the quote, only becomes fearless when it attains firm and peaceful ground in that supreme reality. Sounds like Gaudapada. Even a wise man falls victim to fear if he fails to reflect on Brahman. So we studied the Taittiriya Upanishad from the first sloka all the way to the last in Portland and San Francisco a couple of years ago. You should remember that quote. Most of these were, the top part of the chart are mentioned somewhere. And I started pulling these out of my own mind because they also should be included. And same with these lower ones, the inanimate animator. That is everything, again, with the idea of movement. It animates everything, sort of like electricity makes various things run, or move, but it itself stands behind. It's the transcendent pervader. So it pervades everything, but yet nothing can see it, feel it, touch it, taste it, smell it, grasp it. There it is, behind everything, pervading everything, always transcendent. It's the immutable transformer. It itself doesn't change, but everything changes at its behest. That is, it gives the appearance of change to everything without itself being involved. And finally, it's the indivisible multiplier. It always remains one, or as we say in Vedanta, not two. But yet there it is, everything's coming out of it in diverse ways. Sri Ramakrishna uses much simpler terms to describe it. He says, at times the snake sits still, at other times it wriggles across the ground, but it is all the same snake. Again, the snake contains poison within it, but it does not die because of that. So in those two statements of Sri Ramakrishna, which I wanted to put together there, many of these epithets are inferred, you might say, or even outright explained in a simple way. So we wanted to go there with this quick trip to this color chart inscrutable epithets of Brahman from his very first statement in this chart. Now, let's return back to this chart to take a few of Swami's great statements in the remaining few minutes. I like this very much. I don't know where he came up with it, but it's just such a result of deep reflection. He says, finite things, because they are changeful, cannot satisfy the hunger of the soul of an awakened man. Ironically, and for various reasons, they cannot satisfy the hunger of an unawakened man either. It's just, I think people were sitting dumbfounded in his classes when he came up with statements like that. But if they were recorded and we run later, gather them and put them in a format like this, then we have time to really think and ponder them. That's beautiful. It doesn't matter whether you're awakened or unawakened, none of this will satisfy you. Is basically what he's saying. So, conclusion, give it up. Give it up. And let go and let God, if you want to put it that way. But always remember, the divine exists. You see, it's the non-existent existence. You see, it's a non-existing existence. You have to put it together with epithets that are dualities that contrast each other. And not conflicting sets of dualities, contrasting sets of dualities. And then you'll get an idea of what Brahman is as apart from the world. The further you go inward towards Brahman, the further away you go from the outer world, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. So this is something to be attained. Recently, quantum physicists are speaking of the scientific being, both a participant and an observer. Oh, I'm sorry. So recently, quantum physics are speaking of the scientist being both a participant and an observer. Some scientists are calling consciousness singular, never dual or plural. When they speak like that, they are talking like illumined souls. But unfortunately, they do not follow the method of transcending the intellect and finally reaching nirvikalpa samadhi. It is Sri Ramakrishna who stands for that experience. Shankara stands for that. Gaudapada too stands for that. These are true Advaitists. So come to the retreat in May with us, glimpses of Gaudapada, and we'll show you why he was a great Advaitist. My teacher used to say at the beginning of some of his talks, I salute Gaudapada because he was an illumined soul. So you can see how Swami Vivekananda could talk objectively about all of this, and he could bring in science, and then he would shift over to philosophy, then he would shift to religion. He would say here, Western man, because he has accepted the Semitic train of thought, has accepted the doctrine of sin. And when Western savants talk of illumination or perfection, they use the term salvation. Sin and salvation go together, but all of this is the gift of Paul. But what Christ preached was not Paulism. What Christ taught was pure mysticism. Quote, I and my Father are one, unquote. That I is not Jesus. I is the Atman, uncreate essence. That Father does not mean the personal God. Father means Nirguna Brahman, the Godhead, the ground of existence. So when Swami Aseshanandaji looked out upon his congregation, and even though they were Vedantists and saw many of them had been raised in fundamentalist Christianity, and maybe some were averse to it and turned their backs on it, others were attracted to it, others used it as their moral and ethical foundation. At the same time, none of them knew about non-dual experience that India had had, that the Indian seers had had. They could only begin to hear about it. And how can you really hear much about it when all you have this to grasp onto? Because all you have as your foothold is the unseen seer, the unstruck sound, and so forth. So he had to give them some idea of where they came from. So he would make a statement like that. Get them away from the idea of original sin. As I've often told you, when I first met him, it was one of the first things he said to me. He told me face to face in my first meeting, if you believe in original sin, I cannot teach you, you must leave. And I said, Swami, I don't and I never have. It doesn't make sense to me. I want to learn the Advaita. And so he said, come, I will teach you. And this was one of the first conversations I ever had with him. So he used to say, you have to put original sin out the window. And then you can come and learn this teaching of I and my Father are one. Aham Brahmasmi, they would say in India long before Christ. This self is Brahman. Pragyanam Brahman. Ayamatma Brahma. And so forth. Here's a really beautiful one because, India speaks in terms of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Gaudapada's teaching brought that back current. That's, of course, Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti. We had that listed on the first chart we looked at today, that Vasishtha was talking about how the Jivan Mukta goes beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. So here, Swami Aseshanandaji puts it very, very contemporary and very clever. He says, if we accept the waking state, we become realists. If we accept the dreaming state, we become idealists. If we accept the deep sleep state, we become nihilists. We do not know our own existence. We have to transcend these three states and realize Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So beyond the three states, as you know, A, U, and M, of that symbol of Om that people put everywhere on their walls or their bumpers or in their houses, there's this little half moon turned on its back with a dot. I call it a one-eyed smile. And that's Turiya. It's beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It's just called the fourth. Turiya means the fourth. So to go beyond those three states of your consciousness that you're always revolving through every 24 hours, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and even in waking state, not realizing, as Ramana Maharshi said, that this is waking state, dreaming state number 1 and dreaming state number 2, that you're in a dream here in the waking state too, and then Aseshananda would say, wake up. Simply wake up from this dream. And a lot of the things that are putting you to sleep, these sleeping pills, are lust, anger, greed, fame, wealth, and so forth, power, domination. Those are putting you to sleep to your true nature. So you don't think waking up here on the waking state is like all of a sudden I see all light. You see, and everything disappears. It's getting rid of these sandbags off of the hot air balloon of your mind. You see, probably what better object to attach to the ego than a hot air balloon. See? But it's got all these weights attached to it. We just had this teaching last weekend at the retreat, precipitous ascent. So cast off those weights and all of a sudden you wake up here with your third eye open in this state of consciousness, and it's just one state of Turiya. Waking, dreaming, and deep sleep fit into it. They're not real in themselves without it. Beautiful sayings from Swami Aseshanandaji Maharaj. There he is, did I put it back? Sitting in the Lomas cave, you see. Now I myself have never been to the Lomas cave, so I hope that he isn't a giant. This doorway is out of proportion. He may be just this small walking into Lomas cave, or maybe bumping his head, I'm not sure. But anyway, there he is sitting studying a scripture there at the doorway of the Lomas cave, this famous cave in India, this temple, in a rock mountain hewn right into it, and thinking about Jivan Mukta state that he's in and wants to attain and so forth as a younger man. And thinking thoughts like this: there can be no freedom without discipline. Thus, we should not give freedom to the senses. We must get freedom from the senses. One of his more famous statements, famous among the several hundred people that were there in Portland listening to him, and eventually to the thousands of people that came to know of him. The last living monastic devotee of Sri Sharda Devi until he passed away in the mid-90s, in his 90s. And here he is again, mixing it up with government, politics, church, business, and Western mind. He says, the early politicians have given a great maxim to the American people called, quote, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. However, You are using life, liberty, and happiness to build an affluent society with atomic bombs or hydrogen bombs as the source of your power. Your credo seems to be, quote, pray to God, but keep the powder keg dry, unquote. Of course, he means gunpowder there. And will this external power last? The Roman civilization has come and gone. How long will America be there? We might as well read the quote on the bottom in context, connection actually with that. He says, 2 wars have come and gone since the passing of Swami Vivekananda. A 3rd war is on the horizon. Interesting, why do you think beings like Swami Vivekananda would come? To help stave off war that is coming to Earth. He came before both of those world wars. It's an interesting thought. So he has to be there to make sure the world survives after the wars, and hopefully maybe to offset them. Who am I talking about here? Who does it remind you of? Sri Krishna, mediating the war of Kurukshetra. He tried forever to try and get the Pandavas and the Kaurava clan not to go to war. He tried for a long time. So don't blame him for finally telling Arjuna to go kill his enemies, because Krishna was there mediating for years, trying to keep that war from happening. And it happened anyway. So the Great Soul knows that people are attached to domination and power. Atom bombs and hydrogen bombs eventually will be their weapons, powder kegs, gunpowder kegs, and so forth. So he's there to try and talk some sense into them. So he goes on. A 3rd war is on the horizon. Therefore, if we are to survive, we must ask our leaders and all people not to think in terms of power, but in terms of wisdom. Scientific knowledge that brings power to society and theological knowledge that gives power to the church will never solve our problems. Freedom from fear of death, from loneliness, and from uncertainty will come via spiritual wisdom only. And I can almost hear him put an end to that statement. You must become a Jivan Mukta, a living liberated soul. Only a living liberated soul can solve the problems of church, religion, fundamentalist religion, and politics and business. So he was a great guru for us. He says here, a guru is like a friend, a philosopher, and a guide in this pilgrimage called life. When Swami Vivekananda was first meditating, he could see into the past and the future, but Sri Ramakrishna told him not to acquire external or supernatural powers, but to get inner vision instead. Our master is thus the great spiritual physician who removes obstacles and takes all problems away. So again, statements against the search for sensationalism, occultism, miracles, mystery mongering, all of those words are good ones to use in terms of people's tendencies in the West who want to go towards this outer show, or they get attracted to phenomena. The teachings of the Buddhists and the Vedantists are that phenomena is unreal. They come and they go, and there's no substance in them. So you back off of them, give them up, and you attain inner vision and higher knowledge. And that sets you in good speed, and then you have the peace that passes all understanding. However, there is also sometimes a little bit of constructive criticism that went on in Swami Aseshanandaji. I won't mention any names here, but he said, they speak of emptiness. Who's they? That's the names I won't mention. You can put it together. They speak of emptiness. What is that? Egolessness? Blowing out the ego is not enough. One must realize the Atman. So let's just say there are schools of thought that say, oh, let's blow out the ego, and that'll do away with all the problems. But that's just emptiness. What about fullness? Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnamadachite. What about fullness? The fullness of Brahman. That's in Jivan Mukta state. That's in realization. That's in your Atman, not in your Anatman. Your Anatman cannot produce anything real or substantial. It's all in that all-pervasive Brahman. And here's some words for you to meditate on. Some very simple three-word statements to meditate on if you want to try and understand your true nature, which is formless, birthless, and deathless. Next to that little oval bubble, there's another one. Vedanta, according to Vivekananda, is about two main things: the divinity of mankind and the oneness of existence. If you want to boil it down into two statements or teachings about Vedanta, there you have it. Your true nature is divine, not sinful, and oneness of all existence, not two-ness of all existence, Advaita Vedanta. That would be the way that Swami Vivekananda and Swami Aseshanandaji would both speak about that. And so we might want to offer musical tribute to both of them. Here at the end of our fifth and final class on Advaita Vedanta in a Jivan Mukta, that I gave a more personal title to, simply calling it My Guru's Teachings. Vimoksham swatmanas chaturyogavihi pritagva samahatair hitam lokasya cha tavagya sadayediti prichanaraha vivekanandate prabhate pranjali narendra shashave narendra yovane narendra kridane narendra shikshane narendra palane narendra garpane vivekanandate prabhate pranjali vivekanandate prabhate pranjali vivekanandate prabhate pranjali. Which in English means, O Vivekananda, your message transmitted from the platform of non-duality as a Jivan Mukta is for the realization of the soul and for the good of the world. By reinterpreting and coalescing the four yogas and making them accessible and understandable to humanity, you have destroyed the foundation of ignorance in this age and ushered in a new era. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, O Vivekananda, we offer you our complete, sincere salutations. From the innermost realms of blissful consciousness you have emerged, triumphant, O all-renouncing one, drawn by the heartfelt love of the devotees and the piteous cries of suffering humanity. Truthfully, it is Lord Shiva himself who has appeared on this troubled earth in this wondrous form, transmitting it into a paradise. In this auspicious dawn of illumination, O Vivekananda, we offer you our profound and sincere salutations. Om asatoma satgamaya tamasoma joytirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya abira abira mayeti rudrayate dakshinamukam tenamam pahi nityam. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from the unreal to the real. And enter into us fully with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.